Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Local Search Expert Series. We are going to get started in just a second. I noticed that we've got a lot of people here in the chat already saying hello. Let's give some of the stragglers a chance to join in. I'm seeing the attendee numbers are going up, so we still have a little bit of time. But it's great to see we've got so many people here already. We've got Philip from sunny Arizona. I'm jealous of that. It's very cold, although it's not -25 like Aaron in North Dakota. I'm not jealous of that. I'm like 40 here in Texas and I'm freezing. Stanley, yes, the webinar will be made available as a recording. Essentially, you'll get a link to the recording in an email around this time tomorrow. The shareable aspect of it, I'm not quite sure how easy it is. I think you might have to register, but if you send the link that you use to register, you should be able to share that with your team as well. But we've got a really great discussion lined up for you all today, and so I think we can go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Justin Meredith. I'm a digital marketing manager here at Birdeye. And today we're joined by one of my favorite guests who was actually one of our keynote speakers for our Birdeye View event last year. And I'll introduce her in just a second. But to get things started, we're going to be talking about how to grow your business on Google across every location. And when we say every location, that could mean if you are an agency and you're managing a bunch of clients and you have a bunch of locations for each of those clients, or even if you have one location, things that we're going to talk about today will still be applicable and relevant for you, but we'll also mix in some things about how, to scale and how you can manage, 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 locations, effectively. So really excited for this. We've got a lot to get into. But before we jump into it and I bring in or introduce our guest, let's take a quick look at your webinar dashboard. So on the right side of your screen, you should see a kind of a paler window with a few options such as chat, docs, and Q&A. People have already found the chat, which is great. You can plug your questions in there as well. Let us know where you're tuning in from, or maybe if you are dealing with anything specific, or if you have any questions about your Google presence or your Google business profiles or anything like that, local SEO, you could drop questions there. You can also drop it in the Q&A. We look at both. And then in the Docs tab, we've got some additional resources that you can go to further your learning. We've got on-demand webinars. We have a couple of blogs. We also have a link to Joy's YouTube channel for Sterling Sky. I definitely recommend checking that out. She posts incredible videos and super helpful content. So be sure to do that. Just as a note, if you're not able to stay for the whole duration of the discussion, or if you have to jump off early, don't worry. You will get an email tomorrow with a link to the recording that you can watch it anytime you want. But I think that's pretty much it. And yeah, if you guys ever have any audio issues or if your screen freezes, let us know in the chat, or I would just recommend closing the window and then opening it back up. Sometimes the connections can be a little weird. But again, thank you guys so much for joining us, and let's go ahead and jump in. And so to get started, let me introduce to you today's expert speaker. And please join me in welcoming Joy Hawkins, the owner of Sterling Sky and the founder of the Local Search Forum. Joy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super happy that you're taking the time to offer your insights. How are you doing? How are things on your end?
Very good. We have a ton of snow. I'm up in Canada, so you wouldn't even have been able to get out of my driveway this morning. There was so much. So everything's canceled. School's canceled everywhere. Almost every single program's canceled. So it's pretty though. I'm not complaining.
Man, like I said, I'm from Texas, and the world falls apart when it sleets just a little bit. Yeah. So I can't even imagine that.
We have this much snow. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think that right. This is probably more than I've ever seen, like locally. Like I've had to travel and I've seen snow like that, but never here. Well, I'm excited for today's discussion, Joy. We have a lot to get to. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the world of local SEO around Google, and the last year or so has really been pretty tumultuous with the Google leaks and algorithm updates and feature changes and the big one is AI, right? And so there's all kinds of stuff that's happening right now in this digital landscape, and businesses are trying to figure out the best way to move forward, whether it's how can they improve where they're at right now, or if they already are in a good spot, how can they maintain that success? And there's a lot to dive in. So to get started, we're already into 2025. We're in the middle of February already, which is crazy. And as always, this stuff is constantly evolving. We talked about the different ranking factors, AI is playing a role, but what are some of the biggest changes or the big trends that businesses should be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the biggest hot topic is AI, right? That's the one that everybody's talking about. I would say that the AI trend that I'm the most interested in is what we call the AIOs, or the AI overviews on Google. So I actually shared an example on my social channels yesterday or this morning, of a local query now where Google's actually using AI and recommending specific businesses. And the funny thing is, the businesses they're recommending for that particular query are not the same businesses that rank in the local pack or in the organic section. Like, it's very different. So that is something that I am paying close attention to. But caveat there is that we haven't seen much traffic coming from AI overviews. So as a marketer, I'm like, well, if it's not going to drive traffic to my client sites or get somebody to call them, am I really going to obsess about it? And we don't even know how much consumers are actually using them. Like, there's a good number of people that see the AI and just skip it, right? So Google's not really giving us a lot of data around that right now. So I'd marginally pay attention to it, but I'm not sure it's like something that I would spend a lot of money or effort on yet.
Mhm.
Just one of those kind of emerging things to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of what I've noticed whenever I see those AI overviews, normally, like, kind of like the answer engines, it's the answer is there, or like is what I'm looking for, and so I don't need to click on anything. But on the local side, I haven't seen too much of that on my end, but I'd be curious to see how, if whenever you were looking at it in your post, I missed your post. Does it provide just the one local recommendation, or is it kind of like the three, so it's kind of another form of its local map pack?
Yeah, it recommended a few different businesses in like a bullet form. So it's like, you might want to, it was a dentist query. So I shared it on Twitter. I think it's either my most recent post or the one before that. I'm still going to call it Twitter, X, whatever. I think it's also on LinkedIn. And it recommended I think three or four different businesses. But we're starting to see, like, here and there, more of these. And this one's interesting
Mhm.
because I was able to trigger it. Everybody I asked was able to trigger it. So it wasn't like a test that they were doing with a small number of people. So you should be able to replicate it. But again, something I'm watching but not concerned
Yeah,
about yet. I don't think it's
yeah.
necessarily an action item quite yet.
Definitely. Yeah. And, I think another aspect is, and I think this is probably something that could be said every single year, but every single year that more people are getting into this online, they're realizing that the online landscape is where they need to position their business in order to continue with future success. And so we're
Yeah.
seeing more competition. People are, as technology gets easier to work with, in the sense of, you know, you, you know, right now there's apps that allow me to code in Python and create an app without ever knowing or having training in coding. And so you have
Hmm.
technology now that's allowing businesses to do all kinds of marketing activities and local SEO stuff and managing their online reputation in ways that they never could before, especially in a lot easier way. And that's, a big part of that's with AI. Birdeye is one of those tools that can help businesses do this stuff. But because of that, there's a lot more competition. And so fighting for that top spot in the search results, trying to stand out, with your Google business profile is getting harder. And because of that, there's also a lot of content saturation. There's a lot of AI generated content that's being, that's kind of flooding the results, or even AI content that's being generated by Google is in the top of the results now. And so there's a lot of stuff flying around. I see we got a question from Randy. He says I've noticed that Chat GPT is kind of like the new search, but isn't Chat just using Google to get that info? And that's an interesting question, or at least the thought on the sense of, like, where do these AI search engines get their recommendations from, like Search GPT and Perplexity and things like that. And is there anything that you've seen, we could touch, I mean, this, this is something I covered a lot in our previous webinar with Darren, but Joy, from your perspective, what is your take on these AI search engines and the perplexities and how they're playing
Yes.
out in the world?
So I actually have a video coming out on this in the next couple of weeks. And basically, to answer Randy's question, no, it doesn't come from Google. It's actually quite different than Google. I'd say it's quite inferior to Google. Like, start doing some local searches on ChatGPT. The results are pretty terrible. And I show some examples of that in the video. But the biggest source that they're getting like a lot of stuff from is Bing. So obviously, OpenAI and Bing have relationships there. And we have seen that if you're a local business and you're like really concerned about ranking on ChatGPT, I'd argue you don't need to be concerned because the traffic is less than 1%, like it's less than 0.5% compared to Google. So it is so significantly small at this point that it's not something I'd worry about. But if you were like one of those people that's like, nope, Joy, I need to plan 5 years in advance. I want to get ahead of it before it becomes big, and you're confident it's going to be the next big thing, then I would say focus on actually your Facebook reviews, which sounds a little weird, but that is one of the things that Bing pulls in local results based on. They use Yelp and they use Facebook for reviews. And we all know reviews on Yelp are a little difficult to control. You're not even supposed to ask for them. So that's why my recommendation is Facebook. But I was giving some examples in the video of basically businesses that rank really well on Bing, better than they rank on Google, but like they have better Facebook reviews. And on Google, obviously, they get way better Google reviews. And Google uses things like traffic and stuff because they know when people use Google Maps and they visit a place, like Google has that data, Bing doesn't. So I would argue that is why Google's local results are so much better than any other platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. And would those other platforms like Facebook, even your Bing, or maybe random other listing sites, like if you're healthcare, is it like ZocDoc, things like that? Do those come into play at all for Google, or are they really just focused on their business profiles and like the website and that sort of thing? Because my thought process here is, if you do the things that are good for, like if you were to say, I'm going to optimize for Search GPT, and so I want to get my Facebook reviews up, my Bing stuff optimized, does that stuff also help with Google? So, in theory, by expanding your reach, by not just focusing on Google because Google's so important, but just expanding that to these other channels and just having a presence everywhere, do those help with Google and with Search GPT? So you're kind of hitting both areas by doing just the good best practices?
Yeah, Bing doesn't really help with Google at all because it's its own thing. And you can find a Bing listing or indexed or ranking on Google. But definitely, like what you're referring to, citations or other directory sites, how you know if they're valuable or not is how much traffic they get from Google. So I'll give you a good example. Super Pages was a directory that used to be big like 20 years ago. Like I remember when I got into this space, it was actually a popular directory. People actually used it. Definitely not the case anymore. So if you were to look, like when was the last time you saw Super Pages ranking anywhere for any local query on Google? Like, I don't know, years ago. You can easily address these by looking at like a tool like Ahrefs or something where you can put a site in. You can see how much traffic they get from Google. If they get a lot of traffic from Google, if you see that site ranking for terms that you care about, then yes, it matters. You should be there. And like ZocDoc's a perfect example of a site that you would absolutely want to get listed on because they rank all over Google and they're a pretty authoritative site. But like Super Pages, on the other hand, no, I would not worry about a listing there at all because that site doesn't rank anywhere on Google. And how can you pass this authority if you don't have any authority yourself?
Yeah. We've got some really good questions here. And I think a couple of these questions that I'm seeing, we're going to end up answering in this discussion with some of these slides. But let's see if there's a couple that we can answer right now. And so we got one. Yeah. So Aman, you're asking what are the main ranking factors for local SEO? We'll be digging into that. Megan's asking, what would be your best guess at years down the road when AI starts to really compete with Google for search?
I don't even know if it's going to happen.
If
Again, I don't have
ever.
a crystal ball. Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball. All I can tell you is it was funny when I was doing the math. Yahoo brought in 36 times the traffic of all the AI to our largest clients. We were looking at a client that had like over a million visitors from Google, and we were like seeing how the other search engines stack up. And I think Bing was 10% of what Google was. But like, and then Yahoo, like last time you heard about Yahoo, Yahoo was even lower than Bing. but Yahoo was 36 times more traffic and leads than ChatGPT, Perplexity, all of those combined. So it's like very small. That's why I'm like, no, it's not taking over the world yet. Until it catches up to Bing, I would wait until then and then see, what you want to do. But I just don't think you're going to get an ROI on looking at it at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think, the only variable for me in terms of like trying to see how much these AI platforms can grow really depends on what happens with that Google DOJ trial in terms of what
Hmm.
are they allowed to do. Because I feel like there's a lot of people who just click whatever browser's the default on their phone and that's what they use. And so I'm curious to see if Google's not allowed to be the default on iPhone anymore, for instance, where does that traffic go? But that, again, that's not something we can predict or prepare for because we don't really know what's going to happen with that. And that's if it makes a difference at all, right? But we got some good questions. Like someone's asking, like, should we be posting in Nextdoor for a local business? Is it
Hmm.
worth the time and the effort? Um,
Yeah. So Nextdoor has its own following and people that use the app and things. So if you get traffic from Nextdoor, like if you see traffic, I don't know if you can actually track traffic from the app in Google Analytics, but certainly if they use the browser, you could. And I would just see how much traffic you're getting from it because I don't think Nextdoor is a site that ranks very well on Google. We don't see it often. So it's not going to be really tied to your SEO efforts. I would look at it as its own thing. If you get traffic from there, if it drives leads, I don't know if they have trials or things you can sign up where it might be worth it. But if you're not getting anyone saying that they found you on Nextdoor, then I wouldn't prioritize it. I can't say any of our clients really do, but I know it's
yeah.
also there's certain markets where it's really big, kind of like Yelp. Yelp is really big in California in certain areas, and there's other
Mhm.
areas in the country where it's like nobody uses Yelp. So
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting how those different things play in different areas, and maybe there's a random state where Bing is just in control. um,
let me know
but
if you find
let's
it.
yeah, I'll let you know. But if there's any other questions that people have, I see we have some coming in. We'll try to get through these as we discuss. If there's anything that's real relevant to kind of what we're currently talking about. Um, but let's go ahead and talk about some of the challenges. And if you're in the audience and you have any specific challenges or questions about maybe something you're facing, feel free to let us know. But right now, with kind of what we leading up to what we've talked about so far, Joy, what are some of those key challenges that you're seeing businesses face right now when it comes to the online landscape, and maybe even specifically for these multi-location businesses who are dealing with that extra layer of complexity with all the additional locations? What are some of the things that you're seeing?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of lawyers, and I was talking to a lawyer the other day who I think just encompassed this problem very well. He was like, years ago, I got all this content on my site, did all the things, I ranked really well. He's like, and then all my competitors just copied me. They go and they see what I have, and they create copies of the same version, and put their little spin on it. But we see that a lot in a lot of industries where every single site is the same content, the same topics, it's all the same stuff. And so we're finding if you are late to that party and you are, website number 5,000 to come up with a page about car accidents and what you need to do and why you need to hire a lawyer, you sometimes can't even get your page ranked or indexed even. Like Google won't even put it into their index because they're like, we have so many copies of this exact same thing. We don't even care about adding another one. So how we've been getting around this with clients, we've actually started spending time interviewing our clients every month and asking about specific things that they've done. So in the lawyer example, we'll be like, okay, tell me about a trial that you did or a case that you did. And for a personal injury lawyer, you'd be like, what was the insurance company's original offer? What did they offer your client? And then how much money were you able to get because you stooped in as the lawyer and you did all these things and talk to me about what injuries they had. And they'll give me like all these examples, of course, keeping their client anonymous, whatnot. But we put that together as content into like almost like a story. And that type of content works really well. If you have real life examples, if you're a home service business, this would be things like how much did that job cost? How long did it take you to finish the job? What did the basement look like before you renovated it? What did it look like after? And then again, we put that all on the page as examples. This is stuff Google doesn't have. And they really want real examples. We can see that in how Reddit has taken off in the last year. So Google is showing Reddit everywhere because Reddit's real conversations, real experiences, and it's much better for users to see that kind of thing than like templated boilerplate content that they see on every single business website.
Wow, that's fascinating. There's a lot to unpack there. But I'm looking at we've got I'm so happy with everybody in the chat. We've got some incredible questions, and I'm trying to think about how I want to fit these in because I want to get to them. Like Amanda, Valerie, Andrea, and Kelly, I see your questions in the Q&A, and I want to make sure to ask Joy those because those are very good questions. So, but with these challenges, is there with the increase in locations, for example, as a business adds a new location, that adds an extra layer. That's another Google business profile. That's another Facebook page. Like if you're trying to manage your social media presence, you need to have some sort of local social presence as well as your overall like big time posts and everything like that. Is there any particular, like when it comes to a business that's adding locations, what challenges do they normally face when it comes to getting set up correctly? Like does that make sense? And kind of what I'm trying to ask here.
Yeah, I know a big one is like getting reviews on new locations can be challenging. You come into a market where you have none, right? You have zero, and then you're competing against businesses that have hundreds, and that can be a challenge. The good news is that the recency of reviews is more important than the number, right? So you can come in, and as long as you have a really aggressive ethical review strategy, I should put in there, then you can easily catch up. Like it's possible. And I also think like Google's not as strict with the review guidelines as people think. Like there's no reason why you couldn't ask existing customers to review a new location if they might be having experience with that location at some point, right? Because sometimes you'll go to this office or that office. I also was asking a former Googler, his name's Brad Wetherall. I was talking to him about like guidelines and how strict Google is. And I said, what about like professional relationships? If you're a real estate agent and you work a lot with a mortgage broker and you recommend them, can you review them? And he's like, technically, yes, as long as you, aren't getting compensated by that mortgage broker. They're not like paying you a commission or like something like that. But if you've actually like done business with them or you've watched them do business with your clients and things like that, then yeah, you could recommend them. Or even Justin, you could recommend me since I've come on and like spoken on one of your webinars, right? Because we've had a professional relationship and like, that's totally fine. But like, so I think this is where, if you got a new market, get creative with your like who you're going to ask. But I think that's a big challenge when you start at zero. You got to almost catch up. So you almost need to be you have to have a faster pace of getting reviews than you would normally.
Yeah, that's the recommendation thing is a cool aspect. We had a question that I think would fit really well with this, and it's Jenna. Actually, yes, Jenna's question. She goes, I'm in the finance space. We use mail marketing, Google, Facebook, Instagram marketing. Always gives us leads that are unqualified for the service we provide. But as a young company, we still want to boost our SEO and grow our online presence so we can grow client trust in us. I'm not quite sure where we would fit into this. And so it sounds like, from what I understand, you're doing the right things. You're building that trust and you're putting yourself in the right position. And like you were saying, like one of those challenges of a new location is just trying to get those new reviews and build that reputation from the ground up. I was talking to Ben Fisher last year, and he was telling me that one of the strategies that they help use is to get their business profile set up before they open and get that stuff ready to go. And then whenever they open, it's good. Is there any credence to that? Or is there some, if you're trying to open a new location, is there anything that you should be careful about opening or starting a business profile before opening the location?
Yeah, so you should absolutely have your location page live and indexed. That part's really key. We'll see people that'll open new businesses and like if it's a new business altogether, their website isn't even indexed yet. I'm like, dude, you're not going to rank anywhere, and you're going to have a hard time passing verification without your website indexed by Google. So that's a minimum. I don't lean in the side of like you have to go build a whole bunch of citations first and things like that. I think that can come after because I
Mm,
think getting your listing up and running fast is important. But definitely the location page on the website is huge. Get some photos of the location,
yeah.
and then you're good to go.
Awesome. So let's switch gears. And now, we kind of, people have been asking their questions, and I see we have some of the Q&A about some of the challenges they're facing. And I think some of them we may be able to answer with the things that we have planned or lined up here. And then we can jump into more questions as well. But let's talk a little bit about what matters most for Google rankings. And,
Mhm.
you know, it seems like as more the things change, the more they stay the same in a sense, because there's still some key pillars of local SEO that still matter. But from what you're seeing and what you're experiencing and what you've tested and experimented with, what are some of the things that matter most for those Google rankings in terms of the local businesses?
Yeah, so obviously reviews is huge. It's a big factor, not again just the volume, the frequency is huge. So I've seen businesses, for example, that had a large number and they had a location that they didn't really care about, like it wasn't a super active location, and they went like a year without getting a new review. And we would just see their rankings would just steadily decline, especially as Google would do algorithm updates. So keeping a constant flow of new reviews is critical, and you also have to keep in track like of what your competitors are doing. So that's the pace you need to go for, right? If you've got a competitor that's getting them at a more rapid pace, or um, the reviews are significantly better than yours, it's another problem. We had a business that just got so many negative reviews, and that's kind of a business problem, obviously. But
Hmm.
that's going to be a big problem. Even if you rank on the first page, if your average rating is so much lower than everybody else's, that's a problem too. Um, as far as user engagement signals, so how many people search for your brand, how many people click on your listing, we've tracked all that stuff. So I've done quite a few studies where I've tracked, if you click on a listing, does it increase in ranking? It absolutely does. So I think this is where brand is important. If you have an
Hmm.
established brand and people recognize you and they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of these guys, that will naturally help your user engagement,
Hmm.
right? So that's kind of the path I go down versus the more black hat path, which I know we're going to talk about in a bit. But
Yeah.
and then as far as citations and backlinks go, I find that backlinks still matter, but they are more of an impact on your organic or your traditional
Hmm.
Google rankings, not local pack rankings. So really, local pack rankings are more influenced by reviews and content on your site. So traditional old SEO tactics work so well for local pack rankings. Things like internal links matter a
Hmm.
ton. The content on your site, things like title tags. Literally, you can change a title tag and it'll impact your Google rankings in the local pack. So stuff like that still matters a ton.
Awesome. Um, Yeah, and I think the one that stands out to me outside of so reviews to me has always kind of been a big one. Obviously, we're at Birdeye, but the reviews to me has always been a big one because that's the one place where you can actually see what other customers are saying about the business, and that you get it's just where a lot of trust can be built or destroyed. Um, and it's one of those things that I've always kind of felt strongly about in terms of like if you can get your review numbers up and you can get your rating up, that's going to make such a big difference. But the one that's really interesting is this user engagement signals, because this was something that was theorized was a factor and people thought and assumed that it was, but it was never confirmed until that leak happened late last year with the Google thing. And there is this the kind of that same thing, these engagement signals where people are, it's not just how many people click on your is it how many people click on your profile, or is it how many people click to your website from your profile? Do you understand the nuances of like what does the engagement signal
It's
means?
both. So
Yeah.
like we watched this was years ago. So I've known it's a thing for a very long time, but because we do a lot of testing, I didn't publish this one because I was like, this isn't something I'm going to suggest people go do. But I had a client that hired this company and they did click-through rate manipulation. So
Mm,
basically they had a contest on their website, and if you go to their page, it would tell you to click on Google, to go on Google, search a thing, click on them. They were on like page 2, and then go to the page and then fill out this form that was on the middle of that page, which had nothing to do with the page topic, and you might win an Apple Watch. And so they ran this for months, and I can tell you it absolutely increased the ranking, like pretty fast. Like it went up and
Mhm.
went up, and obviously they stopped the contest, and take a guess at what happened to the rankings. They went right back
Yeah.
to where they were. So I'm
Yeah.
like, if you try to inflate it, first of all, I've seen a lot of people do it, and it doesn't even work, because if you do it and you're too obvious about it, Google can detect it. So
Mhm.
you could waste money that way. But every other case that I've seen, if you don't keep doing it, you just revert all your stuff. So as an agency, I personally don't like that. I don't want clients to be stuck paying forever for this thing. And if they stop paying, then all the rankings go away. I realize some SEO companies might think that's wonderful. I think that's pretty scummy. So it's not something that we
Yeah.
do at my agency, but it does work. I'm never going to sit here and
Yeah.
tell you it doesn't work.
Yeah. Ben says, so one Apple Watch giveaway a month to rank forever. Got it.
Again, like long term, that one was, I thought was a little risky, because I'm like, everyone can see what you're doing. Like you're like
Mhm.
putting it
Yeah,
out
you're not
there, you're
hiding
putting
it.
no, and I'm like, yeah, wait for somebody to flag that and send it to Google on social media and watch what happens.
Yeah. So let's dig into the business profile side a little bit. I know that there's been some stuff happening in the past couple of weeks that I'm sure we could touch on. But when it comes to business profiles, what are some of the big changes or updates or either recent updates or changes that you think may be happening, or what's kind of your breakdown of business profiles right now?
Yeah, so let's talk about the hours thing. So there was an update the end of 2023. We coined it the openness algorithm update. That's what I called it. But
Mhm.
basically, when you're open, you rank better than when you're closed. So you'll find, for example, if you're a dentist, and a lot of dentists close at like 4 or 5 p.m. If you're open to like 8 p.m. and you go on Google and you search, your ranking will be much better. You'll probably rank further away when all your competitors are closed. So this is one of those things that we've had a lot of conversations with clients about. I still, every time we do audits, we find businesses that are not using this to their advantage. What we suggest is base your hours on when you answer phones. Now, theoretically, I gotta clarify this. Google would say if you have a brick and mortar business, it should reflect when you actually are open, right? So, as a dentist, for example, if you close your doors and lock them at 5 p.m., Google would say list yourself as 5 p.m. There's no enforcement on that policy. Like they don't go around checking. So my usual recommendation to a business is, depending on the type of business, if you think it won't be frustrating to your customers and you answer phones up until like 6 or 7, then put your hours to 6 to 7. But there's like
Mhm.
a catch there, because I'm like, yeah, if you're a retail store and you say you're open and people are showing up at your door and you're closed, you do not want that. I've seen people get negative reviews for doing this.
Yeah.
So it really is a case by case thing. But we work with a lot of service related companies that, frankly, no one comes to them anyway. Like home services, right? Nobody shows up there. So a lot of those people actually list themselves as 24/7 because they have
Mhm.
call answering services. And there is a massive ranking advantage to being listed as 24/7. So
Yeah.
again, if it's
So
not going to piss off your customers, because you don't want to do that.
yeah, Alex, I think that might have answered your question for businesses that are listed as 24 hours. Do they get automatically get listed higher?
Yeah, they
You
do.
definitely
So
help.
because think about it, like they'll be so just to clarify, they don't get listed higher during business hours. They get listed
Mhm.
higher when all the competitors are closed.
Yeah.
So it's like when Google sees a business is closed, they shove it down. They prefer to show a business that's open, which means
Yeah.
like we have
Their
we have
list
a
of options
business.
is smaller to choose from. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a business that's like the only one doing that, like listing themselves as 24/7, and they they rank so far away when they're closed, when everybody else is closed. Like their radius just jumps like crazy because everybody's closed. So Google's like, well,
Yeah.
we'll show these guys because they're actually open still. And again, don't list yourself as 24/7 if you don't have a call answering service, because people do not like hitting voicemail. Like that
Mhm.
can literally result in negative reviews. We've seen it happen. So
Yeah.
not something I
If
would
you
suggest.
Yeah, and if you were to do that and you're a brick and mortar or storefront, is there something you can put on your profile saying like we're available for calls 24/7, but if you show up at 10 o'clock at night, we're not going to be there.
So they do actually have separate hours that you can list for like online versus whatever, but the primary
Okay.
hours are the ones that influence ranking. So if
Okay.
you do use any of the other hour sets, they don't influence ranking. So um, basically, yeah, you gotta weigh the pros and cons and do what makes most sense for your business. We have a lot of business types that they do need people to show up at their locations, and so they've just looked at
Mhm.
extending their hours, or they look to see like, They look at their Google Ads account. When are their leads coming in? Oh, we get a lot of leads at 7 a.m. Maybe we should open at 7 a.m. instead of 8.
Yeah.
Things like that, because it can make a big difference if you have that data.
Yeah. Andrea says Google called to verify or check
Mhm.
their open hours. So
Yeah, I
like
wouldn't be
they're
surprised.
checking on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they will probably do this more for retail locations as well, especially if you get a lot of foot traffic. And if users are reporting you as closed, that's another thing that can trigger some of those
Mhm.
calls. So again, this is not a one size fits all strategy. It really depends on the business type.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about some other features? Like I know business messaging is getting kind of a makeover. They took it away
Mhm.
for a bit. Now they're putting it back in with some extra stuff.
Yeah, so there's a new feature that was just came out a couple weeks ago in the US. And I think it's starting to come out in Canada, although it's pretty buggy. So I don't know if it's fully out in Canada yet. But
Hmm.
you can now add just a texting number. So if somebody wants to text you, you can put whatever phone number you want in there, and then text will go to that number. This is a change from what used to be Google's messaging service, which was in their platform. It was so annoying. Very little adoption. Almost nobody used it. Consumers and businesses, for the record, like either way. We
Yeah,
had lots of businesses that had the chat feature on their profile, and they would get very few chats.
yeah.
So this is way better. This is like, hey, you want a text button? Let's let you put a phone number in that your customers can text you to, and that's so much better. And I think it also supports
Hmm.
WhatsApp as well. So that is a new thing that I think was absolutely the right move from Google.
Hmm. Yeah, it just makes it a little bit easier. It just takes away some of that friction as well when you can just text it versus going through their own platform and business messaging and things like that. Is there, when it comes to business profiles, how important are the categories, their services, making sure those things are updated? Um, I was if you go to the Sterling Sky website, you guys do a great job of providing all of these Google Business Profile updates. And one of the ones that you guys had recently posted about was the category list changes
Mm-hmm.
and updates. How often does that usually happen? And if you're a local business, how often is that something that you should check on to make sure that they're updated? Or if you like, will you get notified if a category that you have listed gets taken away? What would be
They
your
don't
recommendation?
Yeah, they don't notify you. They just automatically replace it. So I think they got rid of like a cleaning service one last year
Oh,
and or the year before, and they just updated everybody who had it or took it off the listing. So they have 4,100 or so different categories at the moment. They do update them every month. So we have a list on our site that's free that keeps a list of all the changes. I'd say if you're in an industry that does a lot of things, like you have, multiple categories, or if you're an industry where they don't have a category for you yet, we actually have a lot of clients in that boat. Then it's a really good idea to keep an eye on it because I know they added like a dumpster rental category last year, and we have a dumpster rental franchise that we work with, and like that was huge for them. Like being one of the first people to know it exists, go add it to their listing. That's a really big deal, but definitely
mhm.
something that I would check on monthly.
Yeah. Mary's asking, do you have insight on adding additional categories? Anytime we update our additional categories, Google requires us to submit a video re-verification of our business.
Oh, that is not normal. You should be able to add lots of categories, and I'm a big fan of like add as many that are relevant, right? So a dentist is a great example. There are more than 10 categories for a dentist. You actually have to pick which ones you want, which is annoying, but you got to pick and choose because you can only have 10. But you should absolutely fill in as
Mhm.
many as you can that are related. You don't want to start to stretch it too much where you're going to start ranking for things you don't do. That's where it becomes kind of dumb. But
Yeah.
there's no real like reason to not add more if they're relevant, and it shouldn't trigger a verification unless the categories are wildly different. So, like, let's say you're a locksmith and you try to add like plumber, yeah, maybe that would trigger a re-verification because Google thinks that you are hijacking a listing. So definitely
Hmm.
not a good sign if you're running into that a lot, and it's not normal.
Interesting. Yeah. So hopefully you can get that that figured out. That is such a pain to have to do the
Yeah.
verification video every time you update something like that. And then the last one that we have here is the Google posts. We're seeing, are they as effective as they used to be? Is that impact changing? Where do you sit when it comes to Google posts? What do you recommend people do to make sure if they need to do them, they're doing them correctly? What's kind of your take on it?
Yeah, so we stopped doing Google Posts for all our clients a while ago because it could not measure ROI on it. Like if there is an
Mhm.
ROI, couldn't even tell you how to measure it. They don't impact ranking. They are fairly like even on your screenshot there, if they had Google Posts, they'd be like below the
Way
fold. So
below.
you
Yeah.
have to scroll to see them. What we are starting to see Google do, which I really hope this is a direction they move into, is instead of showing Google Posts, they're actually showing businesses' social media posts instead from like Instagram,
Mhm.
Facebook, social platforms that people actually use, unlike Google Posts.
Yeah.
And so if you want an example of this, just Google tacos near me. You actually can see like there's a carousel of social media posts from small businesses. And we're starting to see this with a lot of SEO queries. Like I've seen my own tweets and my own posts on LinkedIn and Facebook showing up on Google in a social media carousel now. And then Sterling Sky, my agency, our knowledge panel has our social media posts instead of our Google posts as like a tab. Um, which is really cool. We didn't do that for the record. Google's just doing it on
Mhm.
certain listings. So I think
Yeah.
that whether or not they get rid of Google Posts is, TBD, but they're probably not going to get rid of it if I had to guess. But I think that they're realizing that not everybody uses it and trying to
Yeah.
pull in from other sources. So I do
Yeah.
think that social media for small businesses is becoming more integrated into Google than it was in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And this is we talked about this the other day or yesterday, but it feels like as time goes on, your online reputation is now, it feels like it's becoming way more integrated, like you were saying, between your social, between your Google stuff, between your website. All of these things are starting to connect a little bit better than they used to. It used to feel like social was kind of on one island and your Google stuff was on a different island,
Mhm.
and they didn't really talk or help or hurt each other in any way. But now, as you're saying, like I'm seeing Instagram posts in the search results sometimes.
Yep.
Reddit, I don't know if you consider Reddit a social media, but you see a lot of that coming in. There was a bit, they did a partnership and they've been growing in the results as well. So there's a lot there. Um,
Yep.
and so, in terms of speaking of your online reputation, especially as it relates to your reviews, those user generated content pieces of the, people who either leave a detailed review or, you know, when it comes to that, and where's the impact of, because we talked about how reviews are a top or a key ranking factor. Um, but what is your strategy, your advice when it comes to reviews in terms of generating more, especially if you have multiple locations? How do you manage that? Because you can't just keep tabs on every single person who interacts with employees across all your locations to ask people for a review. And that which would there probably should be some best practices to put that in place. But um, where's the role of online reviews going in local SEO? Do you think they're, I feel like they're still important. Is that importance growing? Do you think it's going to shrink?
Yeah, this isn't going away anytime soon. Like it's I don't know if it's growing, but it's certainly not shrinking. The two things I always tell people with reviews, there's two kind of best practices that work really well. One is incentivizing your employees. You do not want to incentivize customers. That violates a bunch of laws and Google's guidelines as well. But if you have a bunch of employees, you can run bonuses and things to help them care about getting reviews. Like I have a real estate client that was giving, I kid you not, $100 to each employee that got a Google review. I mean, that's a lot of money. Granted,
Mhm.
they sell millions of dollars of homes, so it's like they get their money back. But that would be a more expensive example.
Mhm.
I've had restaurants where the waitress will come up to me afterwards and be like, "Hey, if you leave me a Google review and mention me by name, I get a $20 bonus." And it's like, who doesn't want to help a nice waitress who just, served you really well, right? So you're more likely to do that knowing that they're getting something versus some, faceless corporation. So it works
Mhm.
really, really well. I can tell you, we've tried this. As we do this at Sterling Skies while we run contests for our employees and things. It works really well.
Mhm.
And then the second thing is asking for photos, which you've got in here.
Mhm.
If a review with a photo comes in, it will stay featured at the top so much longer than a review without a photo. This can either be your weapon or like your curse, depending on how it works. Because if you don't ask for photos and you get a negative one with a photo, which I've seen quite often,
Yeah.
and then you have no other reviews with photos, your negative one is now going to stick at the top. So you don't want that. So
Yeah.
my kind of trick or hack, I hate that word, but for getting rid of those is if that happens to you, if you get like a negative and it's like the top one that's featured, go back, ask your old clients, your raving fans, everybody's got them. Just say, hey, can you just edit your review and add a photo? And if you do that, you can literally change the entire order of the reviews because photos matter so much.
Yeah.
So it's a really easy trick, works every time so far that I've tried it.
Yeah,
And should
that's
be
great.
easy for anybody to implement.
Yeah. In addition to, asking for reviews or asking for a photo in your review, posting photos on your own business profile is a big thing as well. Even videos as well. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times whenever I am looking for a restaurant or I'm looking for anything like that, I immediately go check the photos. We do have an interesting question. I mean, we have a couple of slides I want to get to. We have a lot of questions, but I did see this one and I thought it was really interesting. Bailey's asking, we've held review contests in the past and Google has blocked some of the reviews from showing up due to an influx. Any recommendations on how to avoid this?
Yeah, so just to clarify, contest meaning like with employees, not customers. Because I've seen so many
That,
businesses launch customer related contests. Those are like you can get all your reviews deleted if you do that. So do not do that. Okay, employees. All right, perfect. So it shouldn't, but again, it depends on the factors that Google looks at. It's not so much the volume they care about, because I've seen businesses like gain like 50 overnight when they had, 10 in the last year, and they all stick. The biggest thing that matters for reviews is the profile. Like if it's a super inactive profile or a brand new profile, those reviews are way less likely to stick. So sometimes with these contests, people do get a bit aggressive with who they're asking, and they might be asking their mom or somebody who doesn't have a Google account. And then, yeah, you're right. Like
yeah,
those reviews are way less likely to stick. The other thing is IP address. If you are a local business and you start getting reviews from like, way across the country and things like that, that's another factor that for sure will increase the likeliness of the review getting filtered out. So I would check those things and make sure that the reviews don't fall in those categories. But there's a bit of a black box on which reviews Google
yeah,
decides to publish. But it's usually that it's about that person, that Google account, and the signals that they can see.
yeah. Andrea had a great question here, and she says, what type of reviews do you ask for if you only have a small number of clients in a year? Can you give a
Mm.
small thank you if they take time to post? Definitely respond to all of your reviews, both negative and positive, saying thank you to the positive ones and trying to best address the issues of the negative ones. But I just thought that was a good piece, is like, to respond to your reviews. And I think there's we do get a lot of questions, but a lot of people ask, do responding to reviews help with your SEO ranking? And I wanted to see if you could kind of shine some light on, when it comes to reviews, what part of the review does get captured by the algorithm and what doesn't, and what are even if, responses don't, what do they do that can help a business?
Yeah, so there has never been a test done on review responses. We haven't done one. I have not found a way to isolate it, because you can't just go post a bunch of new reviews or get a bunch of new reviews
Yeah.
posted and then respond to them. You don't know if it's the response or the review.
Yeah.
Theoretically speaking, the only way to test this would be to have businesses that never responded to any of the reviews and then go post a bunch of responses and see what happens. But so far, in my experience, I've never seen responses result in higher rankings. That being said, I do strongly recommend responding to reviews as a retention tool, because Google actually emails the person, so and so responded to your review. As someone who leaves a lot of Google reviews, I can tell you when businesses do that, it's nice to know they care, right? So
Yeah.
it is worth the 2 minutes it takes you to say thank you.
Yeah.
I have businesses that send me cards in the mail. That costs more money and time than responding to a Google review.
Yeah, definitely. And I've read tons of reviews in my life, and the ones that I can see especially the negative ones, because I mean, I'm sure everybody's done this, where they go to a business and then they sort the reviews by 1 star at the top, 5 star at the bottom, because you want to know what is the worst I can expect, right? Like absolute worst, what could go wrong? And when I see a business thoughtfully, carefully responding to a negative review, and they provide context and they shine light to a miscommunication or an issue, that completely changes my perspective, versus if it's just a bunch of negative reviews and the business doesn't respond because it seems like they don't care or they don't listen. And it is like, okay, well then I guess that's just the way they are. But whenever they can respond and provide context, I'm like, okay, everybody has a bad day. Clearly, this customer had a problem, but the business is trying to do their best to fix it. And that completely changes my mind about a business. And so, like, even from just a non-technical SEO standpoint, that the what it does in the mind of potential customers is a big deal to me.
Yeah. And honestly, like review responses, I've seen so many businesses. I mean, a lot of people do this, shoot themselves in the foot with their responses. Like I've actually seen responses do more harm than good when it comes to negative reviews because of how defensive people get and
Oh
how
yeah,
argumentative they are. Like, so my tip for businesses when you get a negative review, especially if it's an emotionally charged review, have your most least emotional person at your work write the response, craft it, no emotion, no defensiveness, and like don't tell them they're lying. Like there's no point starting an online battle in your response. Even if they're way out of line and they're wrong, it's better to like just completely suck up your pride and put a nice response on there, because at the end of the day, you've probably lost that customer if you can't solve it offline, but
yeah.
you're going to potentially lose future customers if you rampage about how much of a moron that client was. So don't do that.
Yeah. And that's something that I really enjoy about Birdeye is that especially when you're doing this at scale and you've got hundreds of locations or 10, 20, 30 locations and you get reviews coming in, with our tools, you're able to respond. You can respond with AI, which I think is great to help get the writing started. But I do think everybody should go in and touch it up, make it human, personalize it, make sure that it is what you want it to be. But what's great about that AI response feature is that it can help you get the right tone. So it'll take away that animosity that you may have, or it can kind of keep you in check a little bit, especially if you have a lot of locations and you have a manager in Boise, Idaho, and one in Dallas and one in Los Angeles, and you can't keep tabs on them all. Being able to kind of monitor that from one place in one dashboard is really, really nice. So let's do this. Let's go into some of the SEO myths and shortcuts that don't work. You've talked about some of the black hat best practices, but then after that, we can kind of do our final takeaways and everything, and then we can jump into some of these questions and try to answer as many of them as we can. So Joy, what are, you talked about, you said you hate the word hack, and there's some, it's either you're buying a new Apple Watch every month to keep that trick going. What are some of these shortcuts, hacks that may work in the short term, or they may work as you're doing it, but they're not long lasting, effective best practices?
Yeah, so lately, the last 2 years, I've spent a lot of time on our YouTube channel. So we have videos on all three of these topics in the last few months that I went over. And so click-through rate, like I mentioned before, it does work. We showed an example where we did it for a restaurant and it boosted the rankings, and you can kind of see them decline. So not something I would suggest doing, but there's a lot of SEO companies out there that are doing this now, and not even ones that are branded as Black Hat. Like it seems to be being adopted more commonly, and I am worried about it. So if you're a business and you're hiring an SEO company, it's worthwhile knowing if they're doing this for you, because there's potential risks, especially if you leave and they stop doing it. You could see a complete reversal in your rankings. There's also, if they're not sophisticated enough in how they're doing it, they can actually cause Google to push you down even further. So it can backfire. That's something to be really aware of. Parasite SEO is this concept of, instead of posting on your website, post on other websites instead. One of the big ones I looked at was LinkedIn. People write LinkedIn articles and they outrank websites because LinkedIn's authority in the last year has grown substantially. It does work, but it's short term. So unless you keep doing it and keep pushing out stuff at scale, it just doesn't work. So I've tracked a bunch of cases and did a video on that. And also the tactics you got to do for it to work are pretty not things I would do, like buying comments and buying lots of links to point to these. So I have a whole video on that, but not a practice I advise
Yeah.
on doing. And then the final
Yeah.
one is, we actually had this happen with our local search forum. Somebody had a thread about this reputation company, probably one of your competitors, Justin, and they do not have a great reputation, which is so ironic for a reputation management company. Somebody posted about them on the local search forum and was talking about how they're a crappy company. Well, they are a review removal service, so they know all these tricks to get stuff removed. So they basically filed a fake DMCA request to Google I don't have time to get into what that is. If you're not sure, go watch my video on it. But they were able to get our thread removed off Google by doing that. Really shady stuff, but it's crazy to know that like people are willing to go to this length. And it didn't work for them because what replaced us for their brand name now is a terrible Reddit thread that's just as bad and has scathing comments as well. So yeah, it's not something that I would suggest spending thousands of dollars on, but there are literally companies that will charge you thousands of dollars to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. It's I mean, I love the video that if you go to the docs tab and you see that we have a link to Joy's Sterling Sky YouTube channel, go watch those videos like on Parasite SEO. Super enlightening. And we were talking about it yesterday when we were kind of getting prepped for this discussion. And I was saying that a lot of these tricks, it feels like you're doing steroids. Like if you do steroids, you can get really ripped and jacked, but you still have to go to the gym. But as soon as you stop doing the steroids, it all falls off. And it's the same thing like this. As soon as you stop doing the hack or the cheat, or maybe if you get caught, that's, all of that stuff that you did, all the results that you brought in just go away. And there's, one of the things that I think is really strong about some of the stuff Birdeye does and what you guys do, Joy, is you do it the right way. It's not buying reviews. It's not the shady tactics to get stuff removed. It's not click manipulation. It's real, true, organic online reputation management that builds your reputation the right way so that it's much less not versatile is not the right word, but it's much more sturdy against changes, and it's you don't it's just stronger organically. It can stand on its own. It doesn't require cheap hacks and stuff to stay afloat. And we've talked about with this complexity of having multiple locations, especially when it comes to managing your Google reviews and your business profile and your listings. And this is something that Birdeye, I believe, is the best in the industry at doing, especially because of this role. I mean, we've always been involved with AI. We've always had some sort of implementation of it. But in the last few years, we've really kind of made it a core part of our value offering, so to speak. What's really great is it's the complete online reputation management tool. So your social media, you can run your localized social media for all of your locations from one place. You can do that for all your Google business profile listings. So if you're updating categories, descriptions for SEO, like your SEO style descriptions, your hours, your business names, you can do all of that from Birdeye, no matter how many locations you have. But not only just for Google, but you can also do it for Bing and for Facebook. And for, I can't even remember the number of different review sites that you can connect to. It's in the hundreds. But essentially, you can manage your entire online reputation using AI to help analyze the data that comes in. So your sentiment from all your reviews, from all hundreds of your locations and all those different sites, you can analyze it immediately. One of my favorite pieces right now that we have is it's there on the bottom right under the AI data scientist box, the competitors AI. That's a new one that we just, insights and competitors are new, but competitors is super awesome, because imagine if your boss comes up to you and is like, hey, we need you to do an analysis of all of the competitors in our Austin, Texas market. I need you to tell me exactly what their customers are saying about them in good and bad ways. I need you to tell me their social media strengths, and I need you to tell me exactly how they compare to us. If that happens to you, you're going to have to respond with, okay, I'll see you in a week and a half or so when I can gather all this data and scrape the internet and pull this together and format it for you. But with Birdeye, with this competitor's AI tool, you can do that in minutes, and you get a full-blown like McKinsey level SWOT analysis, and you can do it for all your locations in just a couple minutes. And so that's one of our newer things that I just absolutely love. But the big thing too is, especially with reviews, is that you can actually automate your review request campaigns and your response campaigns, and you can send them Facebook, Google, really any of those sites that we connect with, but you can text them, email them. And we also know that the in-person review request is the most important thing. So we have QR codes, but it allows you to ask that customer in person for a review, then follow it up with the text. So it's really, really helpful there. And so I highly recommend at least just checking it out. Go look at our website and check out some of the capabilities and see how it fits. We cover all kinds of different industries. So it's a really, really powerful tool, and it just makes things easier, especially as you have more locations. Being able to manage all this stuff from one place is absolutely incredible, and it's super user friendly. So definitely check that out. But I know we're at our time. Maybe we have a couple minutes. Joy, I know you said you had another call coming up. Would it be possible to answer a couple of these questions real fast?
Yeah, I told them I'll let my colleagues wait for me. So
Okay, cool. Thank
yeah,
you.
we have a couple minutes.
I'll,
I can't
I'll,
leave them too long, but
I'll send them some flowers as well. So we have a question from Kelly, and I really wanted to ask this because she actually attended a webinar that we had yesterday. And her question is, I was in the webinar yesterday, and and asked about local search for an online service company. It's very niche. We're doing marketing specifically for credit unions. They don't have a marketing budget, so I've introduced SEO. We talked about the importance of content for building the organic search, but if you have advice to try and fight for top spots in search results, we have credit unions in a few states. So I was thinking of maybe trying adding service areas for them on Google Business Profile. If so, let me know what you think, as well as adding the website to directories. So, and I think we can even broaden this question to service area businesses in general. What is your approach for those folks?
yeah, so just a couple things. First of all, service area businesses usually use that service areas thing on the Google Business Profile. That does not influence ranking. So unfortunately, you can't influence how well your business profile ranks or how far away it ranks based on those service areas you fill out. It doesn't do anything. It's based on your actual location and your PIN. And then you have a radius that you'll rank for. It depends on how many competitors there are, how good they are, that kind of thing. Service area pages, so creating, a page for Austin, a page for Dallas, a page for Houston, et cetera, that can work. Now, where you're at a disadvantage is that one of the big ranking factors for local queries is the presence of an address. So if you have an address, you need to make sure your address is listed on your page. That is absolutely a ranking factor. If you have a location in Houston, you don't list your Houston office, you're leaving a lot on the table. So we've done this for service area businesses before where they're like, oh, I don't have anybody come up to me at my address, so I don't list my address on my site. And I'm like, we put their address on and the rankings boom, which is awesome. So the negative to having service area pages is obviously don't have that address. So you're at a disadvantage against other competitors. So they work really well for some businesses and not as well for others. I would try a few, see how they do. And obviously, if they work really well, then create more of them.
Awesome. I think that's great. That's a great piece of advice. The service area, I feel bad for the service area businesses because they definitely have an uphill climb.
They're my favorite though. Like they're just the best. I don't know.
They're the sweetest people.
Yeah,
They go out of their way to go to your home or things like that. My best friend who I've known since I was 5 has a service area business here in Austin. And he's just one of the hardest workers because the amount of miles he puts on his work truck is crazy. Mm-hmm. We have another question, and I thought this was kind of interesting, and I wanted to get your take on it. But this is Andrea's asking: I'm a real estate broker, and I have a new verified business profile. I want to add property listings as products on my Google page. Is that possible? How do I go about doing that, or is that how I do it?
Yeah, I'll save you time. We've done this for lots of real estate agents in the past. They do nothing, so don't bother. It doesn't help your ranking. They don't really get clicked on because we've used tracking UTM to see if how many people click on them. They don't generate much clicks. So I would not spend any time on that. If you're a real estate agent, probably the best bang for your buck is writing articles on your website, especially articles on like what it's like to move to specific places, what it's like to what neighborhoods in those specific places are better than others and why. Things like what are the best schools, like that kind of content tends to do better for real estate agents and will go a lot further than spending time adding products to your business profile.
I think that's a great. Yeah, we got a lot of questions, industry specific, but I do know if you talk to somebody from Birdeye, one of the things that's really interesting is when you start working at Birdeye, you basically get trained in a lot of this stuff, especially on the industry specific thing and stuff. And we've got a ton of resources on our website. So if we're not able to get to your question, I recommend getting connected with one of our folks who can answer some of those questions for you. But I think that might be all the time that we have. Thank you so much, Joy. I think this was an incredible discussion. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. We have had so many great questions. coming in. It's pretty remarkable. We might just have to do another episode of this where it's just a Q&A, because we have some amazing, attendees. So thank you guys so much. Joy, is there, we put the link to your YouTube page in the Docs tab here, but is there anywhere else that you'd like to plug in terms of Sterling Sky? Is there, you were mentioning that you tweeted some stuff out. Where should people go to follow you and learn more about you guys and the work you're doing, or even the local search forum as well?
Yeah, if you've got questions, local search forum. We also have our own subreddit now, which is local search. So whatever platform you like, I guarantee you we're already on it. So find Sterling Sky there. Local search forum's a great way to ask questions and get specific answers and stuff if you have burning questions. And obviously my agency's website, we do local SEO, is sterlingsky.ca.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. If we weren't able to get to your question, I will do my best to email you at some point in the next couple of days with an answer, or at least I'll give somebody the answer to give it to you, just depending on, how many hands I can have working on this. But be sure to follow us on LinkedIn. We've got another great webinar coming up next month. We haven't published it yet, but that will be featuring Mike Blumenthal, another SEO expert. So excited for that one. It should be a good discussion. But yeah, until then, guys, thank you, and we'll see you soon. It'll be available here, Amelia. We haven't published the landing page, but it'll be available on the Birdeye website, hopefully in the next week or so. Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and have a great rest of your day.